Montana Territory. August 1883, the wind smelled like pine and ash, and the mountains stood quiet as a woman dragged her bleeding son through the dust toward a man on horseback. Quinn Prescott saw them before they saw him. He had just come down from the North Ridge, saddle sore and sunburnt, looking to trade pelts in Deer Lodge. But when he spotted her dress torn at the hem, arms scraped raw, carrying a boy who looked barely 9, with another running close behind, he forgot why he came. The woman stumbled, catching herself on a log. The boy she carried groaned, his face pale, blood soaking the back of his shirt. Quinn kicked his horse into a gallop. "Hey," he called. "Ma'am, what happened?" She looked up, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "Please, he's hurt." "He was shot. I do not know who was shooting, just came from nowhere. My other boy, he's—" Her voice cracked. Quinn swung down before the horse stopped. "Let me help." She hesitated, clutching the boy tighter. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, steady and calm. "I'm Quinn Prescott." "Just a cowboy, ma'am. Let me see him." She nodded, barely. Quinn took the boy gently. "Bullets in the shoulder, clean through," he said, inspecting the wound. "He needs rest and a clean bandage. I got both at my camp not far from here." She looked like she was about to cry, but swallowed it down. "Okay." He nodded once, then turned to the other boy who looked about 7, dark curls clinging to his sweaty forehead. "What's your name, son?" "Liam," the boy said, voice shaking. "His name's Landon." Quinn gave him a sturdy nod. "Good. You're doing right by your brother, Liam. Let's get you both somewhere safe." He helped them onto his horse, Landon resting against him, unconscious now. The woman climbed up behind, holding Liam tight. Her name came only after they reached camp. "I'm Odessa Nolan," she said, as Quinn cleaned Landon's wound by the firelight. "And they're not mine by blood. They were left in my care 5 years ago. Their parents were neighbors until the fever took them." Quinn looked up from his work, meeting her eyes. "You raised them yourself?" "Yes." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I had no one else. I never married. I was only 20 when they came into my life." Quinn dipped the cloth again, wrung it out slow. "You did right." Odessa dropped her gaze. "We were just passing through, headed toward Butte. Then someone opened fire. No warning. Bandits," Quinn muttered. "They've been thick in the pines this summer. You are lucky you got away." She nodded, jaw tight. "I did not feel lucky." Quinn glanced at Liam, asleep by the fire, curled beside his brother. "They are safe now." Odessa looked into the flames for a long time. "Thank you." Quinn did not say anything back. He just kept his eyes on the boys, one hand resting near his rifle, and stayed up through most of the night, just in case. By morning, Landon was breathing easier. Still pale, but the fever had not taken hold. Odessa worked beside Quinn, boiling water, helping him grind herbs. She moved with quiet purpose, eyes always flicking toward the boys. "You know horses?" he asked as she adjusted the saddle blanket on his mare. She nodded. "My father was a blacksmith." "I spent more time with horses than with people." Quinn smiled faintly. "That makes 2 of us." He liked her voice. It was soft but sure, a voice that had learned how to be strong the hard way. They stayed 3 days in that camp. Quinn built a lean-to for the boys, hunted rabbits, and made sure Odessa had warm coffee in the mornings. She never asked for anything, not even once. But she always helped. On the 4th morning, Odessa rested her hand on Quinn's arm. "I do not know what we would have done without you," she said. He looked at her, dirt on her cheeks, hair tied back with a strip of linen, eyes tired but warm. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "I know," she said, "but I still thank you." That evening, as the sun dipped low and the boys fell asleep curled together, Quinn sat across the fire from Odessa. She was darning Liam's sock with a crooked needle. He watched her for a long moment, then said, "I never had much of a home, never stayed one place long enough to build one. but I reckon I have been thinking about it more than I used to." She looked up. Needle paused. "Why?" He took a breath, not looking at her yet. "Because lately, I look at those boys and I think maybe I have something to give. Maybe I could be more than just a man passing through." Odessa's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you saying, Quinn?" He looked at her then, steady and sure. "I want to be their dad before I'm anything else," he said. "And if you'll have me, I want to be yours too." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you carried one boy and kept the other from falling apart. I know you did not leave them, even when it meant getting shot at. I know you are the strongest woman I have ever met." She let out a breath, and it sounded like relief. "You mean it?" He reached across the fire, his hand warm over hers. "I mean it." Odessa looked down at their joined hands, then across to her boys, sleeping in peace for the first time in days. "You are sure?" He nodded. "I want you. All of you." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and quiet, like she had been waiting years for someone to see her really see her and not run away. Quinn did not move. He just let it happen, let her choose him. And when she pulled back, he whispered, "We are gonna be all right, Odessa." She nodded, tears on her cheeks, but smiling. "Yes, we will." A week passed before Landon could sit up without wincing. The wound had scabbed over and the swelling had gone down, but Quinn still changed the bandage each evening, careful not to tug too hard. Odessa watched his hands closely, not because she doubted him, but because she'd never seen a man tend a child with that kind of quiet care before. They'd moved camp 3 days earlier, settling near a narrow creek south of the Deer Lodge Valley. The boys had taken to sleeping in the lean-to while Odessa kept a straw mattress inside Quinn's canvas tent. He'd offered it without a word, laying down his bedroll near the fire instead. That morning, Liam was crouched by the water trying to trap minnows with a hollowed gourd. Landon sat against a rock, arms wrapped around his knees, still too stiff to run, but alert now. Odessa was hanging a shirt to dry on a low limb when Quinn returned from a short ride with a rabbit tied to his saddle. He handed it over without fuss. "Figured we'd need supper." She took it with a nod, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You always come back with something useful. I'm not fond of sitting idle." He stepped back, watching as she began to dress the rabbit. "You ever think about staying in one place?" Her knife paused mid-cut. "You mean permanently?" He scratched his jaw. "I've been thinking about what comes after the boys are well enough to keep going. You said but that's a mining town, rough, tight quarters, not much space for quiet." Odessa leaned on the table they'd built together from pine planks and twine. "I didn't choose it for quiet. I chose it because there's a woman there named Ruth Emery. She and I worked together once, stitching uniforms during the war. She's got a small seamstress shop, said she'd teach me to run my own if I could get there." Quinn folded his arms. "You want to sew for a living?" "I'm good with a needle," she said. "And I want them to see me build something, not just survive." He nodded, eyes tracking the boys. "That makes sense. Why do you ask?" "I know a man with a small spread near Helmville, 30 acres, mostly pasture, some lowland for planting. He's getting too old to keep it up himself. Offered it to me last winter, said I could take it over come fall if I wanted it." Odessa's hand slowed. "You thinking of taking him up on it?" "I wasn't. Not until now." She set the knife down, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're saying we should give up but just like that?" "I'm saying if you want to build something, land's a good place to start. You'd have room for a garden, maybe a milk cow. The boys could help with the horses, and I could teach Liam to track. He's got the eyes for it." Odessa's brow furrowed. "And what about me? You think I belong barefoot in a kitchen with a washboard and a baby strapped to my back?" Quinn's mouth twitched, not in amusement, but in appreciation. I think you belong wherever you're strongest. If that's behind a shop window with a needle in your hand, then I'll help you get there. But if it's on land that's yours to shape, I'll build the fence myself." She turned toward the fire, stirring the coals with a stick. "I was born in Iowa. Flat farmland. My mother had a root cellar, 3 milk goats, and a row of beans that grew straight as fence posts. I used to think I'd end up like her." Quinn stepped closer, voice low. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know. Sometimes I think I do. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just tired of running." They didn't speak for a while after that. The breeze knotted her drying clothes and made the fire crackle higher. Down by the creek, Liam whooped as a fish leapt from his gourd and wriggled free into the water. That night, Quinn brought out a worn map from his saddlebag and spread it across the table. Odessa leaned in beside him, tracing the drawn river lines and faded township names with her finger. "This is the land?" she asked, pointing to a small square marked just east of the Blackfoot River. He nodded. "Barn needs work, house is sound, water runs clear. It's not big, but it's enough." She didn't answer right away. He waited, letting the silence stretch, letting her weigh what it meant. Then she looked up, not at the map but at him. "If we do this, it won't be because I need a place to hide. I won't bring them somewhere to disappear." "You're not hiding," he said. "You're choosing." "There's a difference." Her eyes softened then, and she reached out, resting her palm against his chest. "I want a place where they can grow up without fear, where they learn to mend things instead of running from what's broken." Quinn covered her hand with his own. "Then let's build that." She nodded once. No tears, no trembling voice this time, just a steady resolve behind them. The boys laughed as Liam dropped a frog on Landon's lap. The sound carried, bright and unburdened. Odessa leaned into him, her voice barely above the wind. "You really still mean what you said, about being theirs before anything else?" He didn't flinch. "I wouldn't have said it if I didn't." She smiled, quiet and grateful. "Then I believe you." He folded the map and slipped it back into his bag. "We'll ride in 2 days." "That give you time enough to be sure?" "I already am." Her voice was clear, steady. "I'm not afraid of choosing anymore." Quinn watched her walk toward the boys, the firelight catching her hair, the night wrapping close around them all. He stayed back a moment longer, hand resting on the saddle horn, the weight of the decision already turning into something solid beneath his ribs. They would build something new, together. And this time, no one would have to run. The ride to Helmville took 2 full days, slowed by Landon's healing, and the wagon Quinn borrowed from a rancher he once traded Mustangs with. Odessa drove it with care, rein steady in her hands, while the boys dozed beside sacks of oats and a crate of hens Quinn had bartered for with a bundle of pelts. The sun held firm in a cloudless sky, the prairie yellowing at the edges as summer began to lean toward its end. They arrived just past dusk, the sky bruised with dusk light when the cabin came into view. It sat low against the slope, logs darkened by time, roof slanted but intact. A split-rail fence ran along the south edge, every other post leaning. Beyond it, the land stretched open and wide, with willows near the creek and a patch of earth already turned from the season before. Quinn swung down first. "It's not much to look at yet." Odessa stepped off the wagon, brushing dust from her skirt. "It doesn't have to be. It just has to be ours." He lifted Landon down with care, the boy stiff but managing a nod. Liam jumped before Quinn could stop him, landing hard and grinning as he took off toward the pasture with a stick in hand. "Liam," Odessa called. "Watch the fence line." "I will," he shouted, already running. Quinn watched him go. "That one's got legs like a deer." "He never walks when he can run," she said, her voice low with fondness. Inside, the cabin held the smell of dust and old cedar. A cot stood in the corner, a wood stove rusted at the seams. A single shelf held a cracked lantern and a tin box of nails. Quinn opened the shutters, letting in the last of the light. "I'll sleep out in the lean-to until I build another bed," he said. "You and the boys take the cot for now." Odessa looked around. "There's a calm here, like everything's waiting to begin." Quinn filled a basin and began washing his hands. "We'll get it in shape, fix the chimney, patch the roof. Build something worth staying in." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You always plan in quiet ways, like you already know how things will turn out." "I don't," he said, drying his hands. "But I know what's worth working toward." That evening, they ate cornmeal cakes and dried apples by lantern light. Liam fell asleep with his head on Landon's shoulder. Odessa tucked them in with the quilt she'd stitched herself back when she still lived near the river town, before the boys, before the war, before anything felt permanent. When she stepped outside, Quinn was repairing a broken hinge on the gate. "You don't stop, do you?" He sat back on his heels. "I stop when there's nothing left that needs doing." She walked toward him, arms crossed against the chill. "You never said what made you take that rancher's offer." "You did," she blinked. "Me. You and those boys," he said. "I didn't need the land until I saw what could be built on it." Odessa crouched beside him, her hands folding over her knees. "I told myself a long time ago not to count on anyone. That's how I stayed upright." "You're still upright," he said. "But you don't have to brace alone anymore." The wind stirred the grass. She reached for the hinge, holding it steady as he drove the nail home. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "When you said you'd be their dad before anything else?" He didn't look up. "I meant every word." She was quiet a moment. "Then, they stayed alive because I made promises to them. I told them I'd never leave, never let the world take them without a fight. You'd be part of that promise now." "I want to be," he said. "Not just the man who fixes fences. The one who teaches them how to be men without losing the good parts of themselves." Odessa looked over at the cabin, light flickering through the cracks in the shutters. "Liam still wakes up some nights thinking the gunfire's coming again. Landon shuts down when he hears loud voices. I can't ease all of it." "You're not supposed to," Quinn said, "but you don't have to try alone." She turned her face toward him, and for the first time since they left the pines, her shoulders eased. "I want you beside me, Quinn, raising them, shaping this land. Not just passing through." He met her gaze. "Then I'll stay. Every season, every storm, I'm not going anywhere." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "You're not just choosing them, are you?" His hand came up to rest at her waist. "I'm choosing you. All of it." They stayed there as the stars came out, the night stretching wide and open around them, the gates swinging gently in the breeze behind them. Inside, the boys dreamed without fear. Outside, the woman and the cowboy began the quiet work of building something that would last. The first frost crept in silent, leaving a silver crust along the fence rails and the tops of the withering grass. Odessa woke before dawn, drawn by the stillness. She wrapped herself in her shawl and stepped outside, her boots crunching soft over the frost-bitten earth. The sky was paling behind the ridgeline, and somewhere far off, a single crow called. Inside the cabin, the boys were still asleep. Landon had begun to sit up on his own now, using his good arm to prop himself. He'd taken to reading from the old schooling primer Quinn had found in the bottom of a crate left behind by the rancher. Liam, tireless as ever, had started helping with the morning feed, trailing Quinn through the barn with a wooden scoop nearly too big for him. Odessa reached the barn door and pushed it open. The air inside was warmer, thick with the scent of hay and livestock. Quinn was brushing down the mare, sleeves rolled, his breath visible in the cold. He looked up when he heard her. "You're up early," he said, setting the brush aside. "I couldn't sleep." She leaned against the stall post. The quiet felt too loud. He nodded once. Weather's turning, it'll keep getting colder. She stepped closer, resting her hands along the top rail. What happens when the first snow falls? You think we'll be ready? He wiped his hands on a cloth. We'll have to be. He glanced toward the feed sacks. I've been thinking we need another cow. One won't be enough if the winter runs long, her brow furrowed. We've barely got enough seed to trade. How'll we manage that? I could ride out to Avon. There's a family there that breeds jerseys. I reckon they might take labor if coin won't do. She folded her arms, thinking. You'd be gone near a week. He met her eyes. Would you be all right if I went? Odessa hesitated, then nodded. If it's for them, then yes. I'll manage the rest. He stepped around the gate, close enough for her to see the faint scar under his left cheekbone. You're not just managing. You've kept this place running while nursing a wounded child and settling into a land that don't know you yet. That's more than managing. She didn't look away. It's easier when someone stays after saying they will. He reached up, brushing a curl from her temple that had slipped loose. I'll always come back. That's not a promise I'll break. Her shoulders eased just a little. Later that morning, Quinn packed a canvas roll with dried venison, cornmeal, and a flask of boiled coffee. Odessa helped him tie off the bedroll, her fingers working efficiently. Liam stood near the porch, arms crossed, watching. You'll bring it back? He asked. Quinn knelt. The cow. I'll bring her, sure as rain. Liam narrowed his eyes. Not just her, you too. Quinn placed a hand on his shoulder. I'll be back before the moon's full. That's a promise. Liam nodded once, then turned and climbed onto the porch without another word. As Quinn mounted, Odessa stood beside the fence. She hadn't tied back her hair that day, and the wind lifted it gently, strands brushing across her cheek. I'll boil water for washing, she said. Landon's bandage needs changing again tomorrow. I set the extra herbs beside the stove, he said. She looked up at him, the sun just beginning to warm the eastern slope. I'll keep the fire going. You just ride safe. He touched the brim of his hat, then leaned down, catching her hand. I'll be thinking of you the whole way. She squeezed his fingers once before letting go. Quinn rode out with the sun behind him and the earth hard beneath his horse's hooves. Odessa stood watching until the dust settled, then turned and walked back toward the cabin. Inside, Landon was sitting up, book open on his lap. Odessa knelt beside him, adjusting the pillow behind his back. Is he gone? He asked quietly. For now, she said. He'll be back soon. Landon looked down at the book. He makes the place feel still, like nothing's gonna fall apart. Odessa pressed her palm to his forehead, warm and steady. Then we'll keep it still until he gets back. That night, she lit the lantern early and sat by the window, mending a tear in Liam's sleeve. The boys were quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from listening for footsteps beyond the dark. She didn't hush them. She let them listen, and she did too. The cold came sharp that night, and frost feathered the window panes. But inside, the warmth held. And outside, beyond the sound of wind and settling soil, the road was waiting for Quinn to return. The wind came down from the Swan Range that evening, dry and sharp, and carried with it the scent of pine needles crushed beneath hooves. Odessa was splitting kindling behind the cabin when she heard it, the slow, even tread of a horse on hard ground. Not rushed, not hesitant, just steady. She didn't move right away. The axe remained in her hand, head sunk into the log, her breath catching somewhere between her ribs and her throat. Then a second sound came, Liam's boots tumbling across the porch. "Ma," he called, "he's back." Odessa dropped the axe and walked without hurrying, without running, though her fingers curled into the fabric of her skirt. She reached the front steps just as Quinn dismounted, his shoulders dusted with trail grit, his coat collar turned against the cold. Behind him, tied to the lead, stood a small red cow with white markings along her face. "Her name's Mabel," he said, brushing his hand along the cow's neck. "She kicks if you rush her milking, but she's sound." Odessa didn't answer. She walked straight to him and wrapped her arms around his middle, pressing her cheek against the wool of his coat. He exhaled into her hair and held her close without saying anything. Behind them, Liam whooped and ran to inspect the new addition. Landon stood in the doorway, leaning with one arm against the frame, a smile tugging faintly at the corner of his mouth. Later, after the sun had dropped behind the tree line and the cow was settled in the barn with feed and water, Quinn and Odessa sat on the cabin steps, a blanket stretched over their knees. The boys were inside, playing a quiet game of stones and sticks by the hearth. "I brought more than just the cow," Quinn said, reaching into his saddlebag. He pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth and handed it to her. Odessa unfolded it carefully. Inside was a bolt of calico, pale blue printed with tiny white flowers. "I remembered what you said about building something," he said. "Figured you'd need fabric if you're going to sew more than patches." She ran her fingers over it, slow and reverent. "It's good cloth. I traded 3 days fence work for it." Odessa looked over at him. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." They sat quiet a while longer, the cold settling in around them. Quinn's hand found hers beneath the blanket, fingers calloused but warm. "You think we'll make it through the winter?" she asked. He didn't look away from the dark horizon. "We will. Not because it'll be easy, but because we've already decided not to give up." "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she said. "For the ground to shift again. It might, but if it does, we'll shift with it. I don't think we break easy." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You've changed the way I think about being strong." He turned toward her, voice low. "You changed what I think home means." Their lips met not in urgency, but in certainty, slow, sure, and without hesitation. When they parted, the silence between them felt full, like something had settled into place at last. The cold deepened, but they stayed outside a while longer, watching the stars blink into being one by one. By the time snow dusted the roof in late November, the fence had been mended, the chimney patched, and the root cellar stocked with potatoes, dried apples, and salted cuts of venison. The boys had taken to their chores with a mix of solemnity and mischief, and Odessa had begun stitching again dresses for the boys' growing limbs, mended shirts for Quinn, and one small quilt that she worked on only at night, by the fire, with a needle her mother had passed down. Quinn built her a sewing table from larch wood, sanded smooth by hand. He didn't say much when he set it inside the cabin, just brought it in one morning and placed it by the window where the light was strongest. Odessa ran her hand along the edge, then kissed him on the cheek so soft it barely landed, but he felt it anyway. By midwinter, Landon had taken to reading aloud at night, his voice growing stronger with each chapter. Liam carved small animals from pine with a pocket knife Quinn gave him when the first snow stuck. Odessa hung her calico curtains in the front window. Mabel gave milk regular, and the boys learned how to keep her from kicking by speaking low and slow. When spring came, the ground thawed early. Odessa planted beans in the turned patch near the creek, and Liam followed behind, pressing each seed into the soil with care. Quinn built a small coop for the hens, and together they planned where to set the posts for a second cabin, one that might be added when the boys grew older. That night, Odessa stood beside the porch watching the moon rise over the ridge. Quinn came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist. "I've been thinking," he said. "We built all this without a single paper saying what we are." Odessa turned in his arms. "You're speaking about marriage." "I am. Not because I need to claim you, but because I want to build the rest of this with your name beside mine." She smiled then, not wide but deep. I never believed in wedding dresses or church bells. But I believe in you. We can stand under the fir tree by the creek, he said. Just us and the boys. Odessa nodded once. Then let's do it. They married 1 week later with Liam carrying a sprig of wild sage and Landon standing tall beside them, eyes clear and steady. Quinn took her hand with no trembling, no doubt, and when she said yes, there was no wind, no sound but the water moving over stones. Years passed. The boys grew into men, strong and kind, and never once questioned who their father was. Odessa's shop opened in Helmville, small but well-kept, where women came for stitching and left with stories. Quinn's hands grew more lined, but his grip never faltered. Together they planted rows of beans, then corn, then winter squash. They built more than fences and walls. They built a life stitched quiet and strong, like the hem of a well-worn quilt. And every night, no matter the season, Odessa lay down beside the man who had once offered her nothing more than a fire and a safe place to rest, and who had since given her everything else.